the shipping industry goes from where they now, if that would be the benchmark, say 0 to 100% within a year.
That was the voice of Youri Hart, CEO of Port IT, and today's guest on the podcast. We're preparing to embark on a deep dive into cybersecurity in the maritime space, exploring not just where we stand today, but also casting the net towards the future. We'll delve into the challenges that Youri and his team face as they implement security in our sector. I hope you enjoy this exciting discussion and it leaves you with some food for thought. If you appreciate our voyage into these vital topics, please consider leaving a 5-star rating. It helps us immensely. And don't forget to follow us so you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. And now, anchors away, onto the show.
Welcome, everyone, and you are listening to The Last Dinosaur. And I'm your host, Chris Aversano. On today's podcast, we have Youri Hart, CEO of Port IT BV. Today's topic is going to be cybersecurity. And this is one of those things that you always need to think about, as the dangers of not safeguarding are ever present and ever changing. The mission of Port IT is to virtually safeguard ships and their crew members, ensuring vessel compliance and business continuity. And they do this by what they call the 4S concept, which is what they built the company on and based their activities on. And this is security, service, solutions, and sustainability. Youri, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Chris. Nice to be on the podcast, actually.
Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing at Port IT and kind of what's going on and what are you guys kind of focusing on these days?
Well, actually, the focus is still the same as 15 years ago with cybersecurity. When I founded the company back then, was around 2007, something like that. And since then, we are still focusing on all the virus threats, cyber threats are happening. And of course, with all the new technologies coming to the maritime industry, it's getting more and more busy, actually. No day is the same within our office. That's it's not like what you normally see on those job interviews. You come into the office, you grab your coffee, and you're going to sit down and you do the following. No, it's basically 24 hours, 7 days a week. And all the cyber incidents are happening, and we are trying to safeguard our customers for it.
And you do that both, their shoreside and their vessel operations as well, right? Which makes it more of a 24-hour business. If you were a cybersecurity person for a local office, well, that's one thing. And I realize that cyber doesn't sleep like shipping, but it makes it even more complex, being having moving targets.
Yeah, no, that's certainly true. Although we focus more on the moving targets because that's really a specific nature. We also, for some companies, we also do their shoreside IT and monitor then what's happening. And of course, during the nighttime, everything's closed down, so there's not much activity. But at the other side of the globe, the vessel is just waking up. Everybody's using the internet, so we see a lot of activity. So yeah, that's continuous business basically, and also continuous threats and potential dangers happening.
Yeah, and when you mentioned this is really interesting. When you started back in 15 plus years ago, what has been the biggest change that you've seen since you kind of kicked off the company? Because there must be a lot of change. We talk about, especially people with technology and even people who started companies 4 or 5 years ago said, well, things like AI or automation, people were really resistant to it. Now there's less. What have you have a longer span there, 15 years in our industry of a kind of tech company or a tech support company like yourself. Like I work for a SaaS company. That gives a little bit of a different perspective because it makes you one of the longer tenured companies. So how has that changed since you started?
Well, of course, there's a big change because when I started, I can still recall, like today was yesterday, that I was on a vessel and a captain told me saying, I have this antivirus software that I need to update. And at that point, I think they were using Immerset B. And he told me, like, I can't update that software. So that actually triggered me to create a solution for it. And to create a solution that could update via that Immerset B. So we did eventually. And if we now look, actually at that time, we had to convince customers that they needed an antivirus system to protect some files, USB threats and all. And now we're further down the road it's no longer convincing them that they need an antivirus system. They are fully aware that they need some form of protection. So they basically go from, okay, I need something, I want to have something, but I also want to see what that something is doing on my network and on my vessels, and if it's actually protecting me, and if it's detecting something, yes or no. So that's the change from the customer side. If we look to technology, of course, and especially the last year, since 2021, when Starlink launched, when the LEO became very, very popular, and everybody is shouting that buzzword, basically, there is a tremendous, how do you call it, grow and expansion on the cybersecurity solutions needed. So although maritime was normally always lacking behind, to say it safely, with technology, that technology now is actually catching up on vessels as well, because, well, crew members are hearing of it, they want to use it, and then they also need to protect the vessel when they are using it, and that's making it actually very interesting for us as well.
Okay, I didn't even think about it's really coming from the security side, and the recent change has really been because of the new hardware that's going up with Starlink. I was initially drawn to thinking, okay, it's still things like ChatGPT for some reason, or more AI. For some reason, I was thinking down that road, but it's completely different. It's the Starlink, actually.
Yeah, well, actually, one of my colleagues here in the office actually had a good, how do you call it, a comparison. He said, like, no, if you take a forest and you have a small forest or a house in that forest, and you have a crooked road towards the big city, it will take time before somebody will find your front door and knock on that door. And if it's open, it will take them time, because it's a crooked road in a dense forest. But now you remove the forest and you put your house next to a highway, an interstate. Basically, everybody is running or driving next to that house. And when the door is open, they can just, well, bounce in. So that's make it very difficult, because, or actually difficult, very easy for the attacker, but also for the ship owner, because they should realize that when they have such a high-tech communication system with such fast speeds, that it's also much easier to get it to be targeted. And because a lot of machines on vessels are still Windows 7. In October, we did a measure. It was like 25% of all computers on board maritime vessels were still running Windows 7, which isn't receiving any updates over the last 3 years anymore, because it's no longer supported by Microsoft. Yeah, and if you don't get those updates and you put a brand new high-tech system, well, the chances that you're getting hit are pretty big.
Part of what you guys do, I guess, is to go in and to evaluate these things and to identify these gaps for ship owners or managers.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And we even have some prime examples already of customers installing such a unit, and they're making one little mistake in their firewall configuration, and within seconds we see probing on the network that somebody is trying to breach the system. And that doesn't mean that there is one hacker behind the machine in a basement somewhere trying to breach that vessel, because it's all automated scripts. Well, because of the quickness and of the connection, basically, yeah, it's more easier to find such a vessel. And then with the websites such as Shodan, which is basically an open source website, which you can visit, and then you can probe for names or specific things, it's easier to breach those systems. Yeah, and it's getting quite handy and quirky, basically, for the potential attacker, which could normally was a how do you call it? If they wanted to breach the system, a well-known hacker can now be a script kiddie, like a kid in a basement just running a couple of simple scripts.
That's really interesting. And I guess that's part of the threat. And I think also kind of thinking a little bit more forward here, what's kind of interesting is, as ship owners build ships, right, they think about what the future fuel is, and they also have to think about technology as well, right? And adapting technology. So that's kind of interesting, because we focus, and I mean, rightly so, a big cost is, do we build it dual fuel? Do we build it, methanol ready, and all these other things, right? But they also have to think about, all this machinery that's running on technology. And like you said, a good portion of machinery is still running on technology that's no longer supported by Microsoft or maybe another company. They have to think about that as well when they start to build ships or upgrade ships, and that's probably a big challenge, because it's not as cool as thinking about right now, like, oh, we're going to have an ammonia ready ship. Like, nope, that's not cool, but it's still super important. I imagine that takes some convincing.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true. And of course, if we look back to 2021, we had the IMO guidelines, which said, well, cybersecurity, they had to follow some guidelines, but those were not pure regulations, just really high recommendations to equip your vessel with proper cybersecurity, do IT maintenance, and so on and so on. But if we look forward, as you're saying, in 2024, a new set, or actually a couple of set of regulations, one really specific for maritime, it's the AX E26 and E27 regulation for new built vessels. So vessels that are going to be signed, a contract being signed next year, are being built. They have to comply with that new regulation. And that new regulation is a ton of cybersecurity, multi-factor authentication, endpoint security, unified threat management, network detection and response. Basically, all the things that you can find on the internet are then mandatory on a vessel to be class registered, or to actually to be allowed to sail out. So the shipping industry goes from where they now, if that would be the benchmark, say 0 to 100% within a year. And that's quite hard, actually. And we are in talks with some shipbuilders, and they are aware of it, that it's coming. But that's quite interesting because of such a big change suddenly.
From working for a technology company, going to MFA and a single sign on and all this other, all these other precautions, it's not as easy as waving a wand, especially when, and just speaking from my personal experience, when you have one company's kind of set up one way, which, I worked for Q88 and then we were purchased by Vesson, and Vesson, does things slightly differently. You can imagine changing ships and one ship owner is buying it. So it's going to be a relatively complex issue, not only in the beginning, but as vessels change hands or change management, because you're also not only changing the crew and everything, but you're having to manage the cybersecurity of the ship as well. And that's a big challenge. I could see that being a massive challenge.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. And it's because of how do you call it, there wasn't a large investment in IT, or that there is like a vessel is running 5-6 years with the hardware. You have to convince customers that they only don't need to do it for protecting their vessel, but also for protecting their crew data and also protecting their company brand. Because if there's something leaking confidential data from your vessel, you should actually protect it. And that's popping up in the media. Nobody wants his name in the media saying it's a bad company or they have done the following or anything like that. So it's very high learning curve, basically.
Yeah, and it's one of the ones that there's not a ton of exposure on, but I am curious to see how next year's the regulations when they come into effect next year, how that is going to impact everything. And I imagine also, and maybe this is less of a problem because as the crews start to get more acclimated and more used to cybersecurity at home or cybersecurity at university, or just maybe a shoreside job and then they're at sea. Is there a challenge? Do you see a challenge of people becoming or being savvy about the threats that ships have from a cybersecurity point of view? Just simply things like, not taking a USB stick and, from an unknown place. Is that something that's still, you need to still do training, or do you feel that that's a little bit better?
You still need to do training on that. And personally, I always say, well, training is good, of course, but if a crew member or anyone in your office as well, if they can bring your network down by just clicking the incorrect link, then your security is not correctly arranged, basically. So we can always, IT guys are always like, no, it's the user. The problem is the user. And sure, the user is responsible for clicking on that link, and he shouldn't. But it's the IT that should be on par, basically, to block such actions. At the other hand, it's also, how do you call it, human curiosity. If you put a park bench and you paint it and you put a sticker on it, wet, don't touch, everybody will touch it. People will feel it. They will look. They will do the handle. Oh, is it really wet? Is it really wet? So that's just a curiosity that we have as humans. So so training will still be needed. Just repeating that over and over, and it will become better. At the same time, also improve the crew members and also tell them why you are doing it, and also and limit the use of USB sticks by setting hardware policies, basically, that the system blocks it to be used. So that then you avoid it and those mistakes can't happen.
Remember, I went to a really good luncheon that the CMA held It's probably about 6 years ago with Josh Shapiro. He's at Liberty Maritime here in the U.S. and he gave a really good presentation about how they secure their vessels, and they had like little training videos with like the sailor, like, putting in a USB, and then like, there was a cybersecurity incident and things like that. So I do think training is good. I know from my point of view, among companies I've been with, we do a lot of cybersecurity training and get these pop-up messages for 5-minute videos on various topics, and it's just like you said. I'm aware of it. I consider myself savvy, but it's so easy to fall for it. And this kind of reminder training and this repeated training definitely helps, I think, over time.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. It's not only happening in shipping, also just in shore offices. The biggest mistakes do happen because people are not following either the training, or the training is not being done. Just they're transferring large amounts of money because they receive an email of impersonating the CEO or somebody else of the company saying, please pay this invoice, and never checking like, okay, is this really you? Like, we have proper guidelines that there is a other person checking the bills that are going out, so that there's always a second check on it, and that people can email what they want, but they're not getting paid for that. So
you're a shipping CEO and you have a fleet. What keeps you up at night? Like, what worries you in the world of cybersecurity? What do you tell your clients that they should be aware of?
I always say to our customers, our clients, saying, okay, you have to take cyber seriously, and not only like, okay, we install something and make sure that there's an IT policy and nobody is aware of it. We take, for example, the Ever Given as an example. That vessel was stuck in the channel, and it was not a cyber attack. It cost a couple of $1 billion. If a attacker could take over a vessel and just turn the vessel around, then they can already cost the company or the globally billions. So it doesn't even breaching that system, but just doing some damage. Just so as a ship owner, just to get to relax at night, make sure that you have your proper guidelines saying, okay, we don't allow all companies connect to our vessels, because we see it more and more. Engine manufacturers, they want to monitor their engines, so we need to open the networks. How is that manufacturer actually taking control of their own cybersecurity? Often that's not really checked, so then they're just granted access to the vessel. So make sure that you check those layers. And sure, it's annoying because every step you need to do will cost you a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes, a couple of hours to actually validate for the first time. But it is needed. And that will make sure that you actually can have a rest at night and that you don't have to wake up. Cybersecurity does not have to be expensive, what a lot of people think. They need to have big budgets, and that's not the case. But most of the one prime examples, we talked about Microsoft. They offer free updates, same as Apple, of course, and all the other companies that have an operating system. But we see it so much happening that customers, they request a cybersecurity system. And the first thing they ask is, okay, now I have a cybersecurity system. Can you turn off the Windows updates for me? So the free security delivered by the vendor, they want to get rid of it because it's costing too much data. And I know that satellite airtime can be expensive, but the thing that you get for free, and which is like the base foundation of your entire cybersecurity strategy, you're blocking that because, well, it's inconvenient, or it's costing too much because it's consuming data. You shouldn't. You need those updates. Last month in May, Microsoft released over 70 vulnerability fixes. Over 70. It's amazing how much issues are happening, and they are all fixed. But then companies say, no, I don't want them. And at the same time, pay for an expensive, they pay for a cybersecurity system. It does not make sense, actually. So sometimes we just put our hands in our hair like, okay, this is really going the wrong way. But it's what you get offered by your vendor. And if it's actually improving, take it, because it's the base, it's the start, and it's also the start of your good night's sleep, basically.
And it's the start that, Microsoft and Apple and whoever else, they've been doing this for a long time. So
yeah,
you figure, and they have a brand to maintain, a brand reputation to maintain. One of the things that I love to talk to people about, and one of the struggles of the maritime industry, and kind of the name of this podcast is the Last Dinosaur, and you can look at it from a lot of point of views that were kind of behind the times. And you mentioned it yourself, with ships running on Windows 7. Even I know that Microsoft is no longer supporting that. if you look at and as you hire folks and maybe they're not maritime folks, but as they get into the maritime industry, or somebody says to you, I want to be a security person, but and they're looking for different jobs. What do you tell people about our industry that kind of made it attractive to you, and could make it attractive to people coming into the workforce, whether it's right out of university or whether it's somebody, because we have a lot of this in our company. We have developers and they've developed all sorts of things. Maritime is it's just code. It's just, what have you. But it is an interesting, a space. What do you tell people who are kind of maybe looking, weighing coming to your company or somebody else's, or somebody out of university? How do you kind of wave the shipping flag?
Well, we always say like innovative based. We have developers, in-house developers, and when they start developing, they go like, you need to do the following and all shore-side based development. So, but that will not work for a vessel because you're dealing with all the networks. So you have to be creative as well. And if you like to be creative, and often if people go into the IT and cybersecurity field, you have to be creative by nature because you need to find errors, faults in software. So people actually like to have that. Or those people actually like to do that. So yeah, if you like to be creative, the maritime industry can be really challenging and can be really fun actually to do so, because it's not everything is already done. Just install this, can lay back and relax. No, it's talking to a diversity of customers. It's globally. You're talking to people from Japan, to people from the US, from Brazil, all over the world, which is very, very unique actually, even for today. We have, of course, international companies, but how often is it that you have a meeting in Europe in the afternoon, in the evening with the US, and in the morning you had a meeting with Singapore? Yeah, and then during the nighttime you're called because a captain on a vessel which is sailing in the middle of nowhere is calling you, and you were one time on that vessel asking you for your help because according to him you are his last resort. So you actually feel some kind of superhero, basically. In, well, I will fix your problem, Captain. I will make sure that it's so. If you like that type of stuff, basically, then yeah, the maritime market is really one thing to go for,
because it is something that, like you said, if you're a help desk, you're helping, folks maybe locally or what have you, or a very narrow band. But I think it goes back to your beginning statement where every day it's something different, because it is a captain in the in the middle of an ocean, or just came into a terminal and having this problem with something, asking for an update or a software update or something, and unsure, and and you're his safety net, and that safety net sitting half the world away, which is very unique to our industry on a lot of levels.
Yeah, it certainly is, and it is, and you have to deal with not only with people that far away, but people with less knowledge, and also different cultures as well. So it's different ages. People are different ages. Captains are much older. Sometimes you have a younger crew member. So it's a big variety. It's like that you work in maybe in a hotel branch, but yeah, then on a tech level, basically.
It is pretty wild, and it's exciting to hear that, because I know, like I said, one of the things that our industry struggles with is that it's old and it's just ships, and who really cares? And it's usually not until something like you said, the Ever Given happens, where people get aware, but they only get aware for, I mean, if you look in, 2 weeks, 10 days, whatever. Now, I don't even think it was that long. I know it was not stuck that long, but the impact, or the media impact, was probably about 2 weeks that people talked about it, and then they forgot about it, right? Or here in the US, if Walmart ran out of toilet paper, everybody starts to become a supply chain expert. But then, as long as you can walk into Walmart and get toilet paper now, people really don't care, right? It's only when there's a disaster. And we're seeing this play out before us as well with this, submarine over the Titanic wreck. Everybody all of a sudden is interested in it. And again, I'm going on a slight tangent, but you look at what will happen is that there will be more laws and rules around submersibles. I mean, whether it happens next year or 3 years, there will be rules now to prevent that from happening, which is what typically happens in our industry. So it is pretty exciting. And it's something that, I'm glad to hear that, at least even on the technology side, it could be interesting for folks.
No, yeah, but it's even like, well, I have 3 kids, 3 daughters, and last time actually and my wife, she's working in a hospital. And one of the kids actually asked, like, okay, uh, well, my wife asked actually to one of my kids, like, who do you think is serving more people, helping more people, your dad or do I? Because I work in hospital. And I said, well, yeah, well, I think you do, mom. You work in a hospital. People are sick, trying to get them better. And she said something I didn't even realize. She said, yeah, but your dad's making sure that that vessel from China, from the US, cross the ocean with all my medical supplies sails over so that I can assist those people in the hospital. So people working in shipping are also helping people every day on a very large scale, which you often are not realizing at all. So that's also actually a different insight as well. Totally not cybersecurity, but
Yeah. Well, it's I did a calculation, and I used to work on basically small MRs that were coastwise, for that's where I got my start. It was, American Jones Act, and what was it, 40,000 tons of gasoline, right? But if you extrapolate that out into a gallon of gasoline, it was something, I don't know, 10, I forgot what the number is. If you're listening to this, go, Chris, you should know that number, but it's like hundreds of thousands, or if not like a million or something gallons of gasoline. But you think about like how many cars you could fill with that
yeah.
one ship of just gasoline. So you look at that and you go, wow, that does impact. You think nothing of it. Okay, we're gonna go, we're gonna load. Okay, and a day and a half of load, 3 days over, discharge 2 days, and we're out. Right? You think about the number of impact on just that one act that was 4 days. Right? That's it. That's the total, or 5 days from load to discharge, and it's just pretty wild. And that's what I think. When people start to think about it, then they kind of get a little bit excited, and it's glad to hear that trickles into the cyber side of things.
The maritime can be very, very challenging, but it's also the fun thing. Like if nothing's a challenge anymore, then what are you doing it for? So yeah,
you're absolutely right about challenges, because even software. I mean, we had an update recently. We had an update on something, and things that were just ticking over. You're like, well, okay, hold on a second. That doesn't work. That we have a little problem. And, dealing with my lead developer, he's like, okay, I know what's going on. And I talked to him. I said, well, you can see this here. I said, we have like a workaround for now, which is, some people, it's a taboo word, workaround. I was supposed to say, okay, yeah, we could tell our clients, just do this and they'll be fine. And he comes back like 3 hours. I found it, this and this. And he's like, all right. He's like, I fixed it. He said, but we're going to put a permanent thing that doesn't happen we're going to do a full system upgrade next week. But he was excited about it. And that's what I think it goes back to challenge, because it was a challenge, right? It wasn't like this was something that should be working. It's been working for 6 years, however long our platform's in, and now it doesn't. He's like, all right, now he's got to go back and be like kind of be like a detective.
that's how it is. Basically, it's the same with our guys as well. You find something and then, I finally found it. I can fix it and solve that particular customer solution. And that's also the diversity as well. Like in the entire industry, there are so many different types of networks, computers, operating system versions, languages, that it's really difficult for the maritime IT sector actually as well to test software on all those platforms and to make sure it's 100% right. I say, well, 100% right the first time with software isn't possible because of that. Even Microsoft and Apple are not succeeding in that, hence all the updates every month, of course. But it's challenging, and that again, it makes it fun as well. Like, okay, this is very unique. How is it be that it actually can work like that? Yeah, we have tons of examples of that.
Yeah, it's like you said, every day is a new day. All right, so I like to wrap things up, and I'm change it up a little bit, and I think I sent this over to you. So as we wrap up, I'd love to give a little insight into people, and sometimes I've asked for a long time about books, and I was thinking, maybe change it a little bit. So here's my new question. I'll try this one on for a little bit, see how this works. Who is your hero of fiction? And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be. It could be comics. It could be movies. It could be books. What is your hero of fiction?
Hero of fiction, yeah. Well, I basically have two, and that's both in Marvel and DC. So one is Iron Man, which is Tony Stark, of course, because of all his inventions that he does and everything. And at the other end is Superman, and that's not because he's strong, but he has the ability to hear everything. And that's also his greatest weakness. And that's the same with cybersecurity. We can see everything, but we can only assist when also the other party is willing. So we have to make the choice of who are we going to help and who wants our help, basically. So yeah, that's how I look into who are my superheroes or heroes of fiction, basically.
That's fair. I like that. I didn't even think about that. I like how you tie it into what you do. I don't know. I kind of like from my Marvel side, I enjoy Ant-Man and then Guardians, of course, because I think it's kind of Guardians cool. kind of fun, mostly because of the music. Because I guess,
have you seen the last one?
No, I haven't.
Oh, that's a tear jerker. Really, it's.
Oh, really? For Guardian, okay.
That's
okay.
Compliments on that, Marvel, but it's
Okay. All right. Well, I know it's out on Disney, and I gotta just find some time to sit down and do it. But like yourself, I have 3 kids. We're a little bit older, so we're doing a lot of running around, especially during the summer. So, Youri, thank you for coming on the podcast. This was great, and I really appreciate you giving a view into cybersecurity, especially on ships, because it is such an important topic. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.